If people are still joining us, they're more than welcome to do so. And I will just let you know that we are recording this meeting. We've had a number of individuals request the ability to access it afterwards. So just so you're aware, we will be recording this event. So welcome to our first online salon series of the year. I'm so happy many of you have chose to join us tonight. I think it's going to be a great evening. My name's Ellen Whiteman, and I'm the manager of the McDowell Foundation. The foundation funds teacher-led research in the province. We're unique across Canada, and we're very excited to have one of our teams share their work with you tonight. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm currently on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis. Recognizing the importance of knowledge, truth, and research as key components of reconciliation, I appreciate and honor the relationships with one another that allow us to both share this land and come together to continue the work of reconciliation. Tonight, I'm thrilled to co-host this event with the Saskatchewan Teachers Association and their president, John McGettigan. I so appreciate the support and friendship STA has provided to the foundation over the years. John, I'd turn it over to you to bring some greetings and start the evening.
Thanks a lot, Ellen. It's a real privilege to be here tonight, and there's nothing easier about my work than supporting the work of the McDowell Foundation. So thank you for your work, Ellen, and your team's work, and I know how much impact you've had on Saskatoon teachers specifically. So thank you. I believe that partnerships are the only way to make change, positive change in education. We cannot do it alone. And I could not be prouder of the partnership that I have with Consentus and with McDowell Foundation. I know that it's just the beginning of a wonderful relationship, frankly. And I think it's a strong relationship. And every teacher in Saskatoon through the STA commits to help the McDowell Foundation. And I'm happy to say that. I also am happy to say that this work directly impacts kids. Sometimes we get in the cycle, especially during COVID times, where we're not talking about teaching and learning, and that's all this is about. So thank you. I also believe that research-based policymaking and decision-making is always better policymaking and decision-making. And I wish that all decision-making and policymaking was based in research, but without the research, it's difficult. And if it's local research, I think it makes it easier for government to do the right thing. Teaching isn't rocket science. It's much more complicated. And therefore the research is absolutely critical. I stole that quote from Simon Breakspear, so I'll send him 15 cents, like he needs the money. I also think it's a real privilege to consider some of the people we're going to hear from tonight, friends and colleagues. And I really look forward to hearing what they have to say. And I would also add that I don't think there's ever been a time where we need the research and education, because what the pandemic has taught me is that some of the structural issues that surround how we teach and learn are dated. And the only way to make those things better is through marrying research with policy and decision-making. And this is part of that process. So I'm really, really happy to be here tonight. Hello, Fatima. Thank you for all the work you do with Consentus, and I know this has been a long-term relationship, and I really think this is just the beginning of something wonderful. So I'll pass it back to you, Ellen. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And of course, I'd invite you to jump in at any time as we go through the evening. I'm so excited that you're here. And this is the first time we've co-hosted one of these events with a local association. I'm thrilled it's with Saskatoon Teachers Association because, as you know, we have a long-standing relationship. So many of our talented research teams have come out of the STA. So joining us tonight are teachers from across the province and beyond. They're local association leaders, McDowell Foundation board members, SDF staff, ministry staff, executive members, superintendents, directors of education, principals, vice principals, teachers, leaders from across the province. And I'm so pleased they're here to hear from our researchers on their work. Our panel tonight includes 4 amazing teachers from the Saskatoon Public School Division, and I've gotten to know 2 of them pretty well, and I'm quite excited that the other 2 are here as well. So Chantel, Kelly, and Krista, I'm going to let you introduce yourselves, but I'm so pleased to have you here. Also joining us is Fatima. She's the Vice Chair of Consensus Citizenship Education Foundation and a Commissioner with the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission. I'm so pleased you accepted our invitation to be part of the panel tonight. As I said, the research team has spoken very highly of you, and I'm very pleased that you've taken a leap of faith and joined us, and we'll see where all this goes. So welcome. I'm so pleased you're here. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Research team will present first. I understand they have a PowerPoint and will share their screen. After the research team has presented, if there are questions directly for them, we're welcome to do that. Otherwise, please put your questions either in the chat or in the question and answer. You can also raise your hand if you prefer to simply ask them a question, and Jay will unmute your mic. You don't have the ability to do that yourself, but you can raise your hand and Jay will go ahead and unmute your mic. We'll be recording tonight's session, as I said, and it will be available on the McDowell website within the next week or so. Jay from SDFPL has kindly offered to offer tech support to us tonight, so thank you, Jay, as always, for stepping forward. So now I'll turn it over to our teachers to introduce yourselves more thoroughly and to share your presentation.
Thanks, Ellen. We're really excited to be here. We do have a really informal presentation plan. We've got a few visuals to show. So you'll see us popping on and off screen just to show you a few details of our work, but hopefully keep the conversation pretty informal. I'd like to introduce my team to you today. We've got Kelly Fredland, Krista Farrell, and Kelly Gibson, who are all grade 7 teachers, or were grade 7 teachers when this project came to fruition in the very beginning. And my name is Chantel Balicki. I was the vice principal here with these wonderful ladies. And, you know, just as life happens, we've transitioned into some different roles, but we've stuck together throughout this belonging project. So we're happy to be here. The title of our project is called Sense of Belonging in the Middle School, in the middle years. So in the beginning, when we first started thinking about, you know, whether we would like to do a McDowell project or a research grant, we were in kind of towards the second year of coming together as a brand new school. So we were in a pretty unique situation compared to some educators across the province, even though this work is applicable to everyone. We were starting a new school by bringing 5 different neighborhoods together for the first time. And we were also in partnership with Whitecap Dakota First Nation, just the neighboring First Nation, who was also sending students to Chief Whitecap School to a brand new neighborhood. So we were thinking about, you know, we were about a year or 2 into starting a new school, and there wasn't a way that things have always been done. So we had a really unique opportunity to think about what kind of learning culture we wanted to create, especially in our middle years. Our school was separated into kind of 4 different wings. So we're the Wing D crew, and we were thinking about how do we want to do business in Wing D to really, we've got these grade 6 to 8 students, and how can we bring students together so that they feel a sense of belonging. The 4 of us just kind of gelled. We had a connection together. So lots of times we'd be in the hallway after school talking about our students, and these conversations just came naturally to us. So it was only natural that we would seek to do like a project or a research grant that was geared towards this work.
Yeah, sure. So you're good. So something that was really important for us and happened really organically was we found our people. Doing this kind of work, which is very much hard work, is really important that you're finding people that believe the same thing. So we were like-minded in what we believed in kids, what we thought about what we wanted for kids, and how we base things in our classroom. So a lot of the things that we ended up doing and we're going to talk about, we had done some of these before within our own rooms, but it was much more prescribed and deliberate this time. It's also important working with this type of work, obviously, to be value-oriented, and it's very relationship-based. So we know that relationships are everything, especially when we're dealing with kids. I think my three very talented colleagues and friends would agree, especially middle years kids, relationships are everything. And they need to believe that you believe in them. And they need to be heard and believe that you see them and who they are. So that was something that we commonly talked about and made sense with our work. We all were grade 7. And the nice thing about that worked really well within our school, these beautiful P3 schools, is that we have big barn doors between our classrooms. So Kel and I job share, and Kelly Gibson was across the hall. So when we were designing this work, we realized we could open up our barn doors and we would teach both classes as one big group. And we deliberately called all of these kids our kids. So Chantel would be the same, coming down the hallway, these were our kids. So something that helped was being grade alike with the curriculum, because we could weave it into math, into language arts, into social, and we met many times to talk about that, but it was all based on the belonging work. We talked about common concerns within our classes and regarding students. And something else that was really important doing this kind of work is we really like to collaborate. I don't know if you can tell, we're sitting very close together. We really like each other, which makes our job lovely. But you need to be able to collaborate. And when you're in a big school with this kind of footprint, we find that being in kind of our wing D, we've become a very tight family. And we started that sort of as building this school. So being collaborative, very important with this work. Flexibility, if you have worked with middle years children, you know that being flexible is part of the work, that they sense if you're not okay with that. So we were very flexible with what we wanted to do. We're building on each other's strengths. These ladies bring things to the table in my 26 years of teaching that I don't bring, and they would just fill the gaps. So that helped to create a really, really strong team. So finding your people with this kind of work is the base. And yeah, we were pretty lucky to do that. Every person you meet, every single one is searching for their story. There are no exceptions. You write yourself into that story by how you treat them, write with love. And that's what we tried to do.
The next part of this presentation, I'm going to talk to you about how we basically came together. So we had all different sorts of students coming together from different backgrounds, and we wanted to create a space within our school that kids could see themselves so that they know that they truly belong here, that they are a part of a family here at our school. We had lots of observations. We didn't have many answers. We wanted to have answers. We thought initially when we entered here that, you know, we could try these certain things and we would get out of it what we needed to, and that kids would all just come together and we'd be one big happy family. But that wasn't what was happening. And so we started to see kids gather in pockets outside. They weren't talking to everyone. We really wanted the work that we were doing to be meaningful so that kids knew that their voices were heard. So initially, we started planning activities and we thought, this should work. It should make a difference. But then we got the Tell Them From Me survey back and other things that we were doing in our school, and it was falling short. And so then we were thinking about, okay, how can we come together as a team, and how can we have student voice kind of shine through? So that's what we were looking for. We really wanted to hear from kids how they were feeling so that we could find ways to bring them all together. So the next thing that we did was we just started asking some questions. And the questions that we were asking is, and they're going to be up on the screen, we gave them prompts. And one of the prompts was, I feel like I belong here because. We wanted to know from kids, why were they belonging here? What did they see? And there's a variety of responses here, but sometimes kids would say, I can speak without feeling judged. I feel valued and cared for here. I'm not left out. I have people that I can play with at recess. Those were all really, really important. But on the flip side of it, we wanted to know from kids why they didn't feel like they belong here. So we could start kind of working with kids to fill in those gaps. So we gave them this prompt. I don't feel like I belong here because. When we did that, we found that some kids said, nobody listens to me. That's a problem. They didn't feel like they belonged because they came from a different culture and a different religion. So they just felt different. They felt like an outsider. I didn't feel like I belonged because my classmates were rarely talking to me. Other kids said that they'd been here for 3 years and they didn't have any long-lasting relationships. Okay, so now we had some problems. We heard from kids. They were looking to us to help them through. So we really kind of wanted to, our next step was connecting. How are we going to get these kids to understand that they did belong here and to help them feel known, valued, and believed in, which was vital.
So our next step was creating a plan. So we had all this information, now what? And so getting advice from colleagues were really important for us, and that colleagues that have been working specifically with belonging in the past. And so we spoke to Marnie Ross, who is principal in our system, Sherry Van Hesteren, who is a consultant with our division. We also spoke regularly with a variety of different staff at our school and colleagues. Ian Worm was a liaison between, Chantel had talked about our partnership with Dakota Whitecap First Nation. And so he was the liaison between Whitecap and us. And so, we spoke to him a lot. He connected us with a gentleman by the name of Sean Lassard, who had done tons of belonging work in Edmonton, where he is a teacher and a professor. And so that was really important for us. We recognize that we are 4 white women who are aware that we teach students of color and Indigenous students. And so we found it super important and critical that we collaborate with other educators who could bring a perspective to our work that we just cannot, and who bring different experiences to us. So people like Nyla Chaudhry, who is science teacher at our school, Cheryl Ermine, a resource teacer, Silsila Miyako, Carrie Harper. So these are a few of the ladies that we would speak to, both formally and informally, on a regular basis, just talking and reflecting about what we are doing, what some of our students' responses are, just kind of getting different views and different perspectives. And that was really important for us. We met regularly also, and that was, I think, vital for this work, being able to meet and talk and, create plans that are from our students' voices. We, as Kelly had mentioned before, like looking at our school survey and just kind of listening to student voice. And based on the responses that we had from our students, we were more deliberate in the strategies to engage the students collectively. So a few of the things, and I'll just share a screen with you, a few of the things that we had done we had daily conversations. So as Cal had said, students are outside and just their little pockets everywhere. And so they're from the same class, but they don't know each other. And so we did these daily conversations, and we did them daily. It just became a part of our routine. We did a walk in the morning, and then students were able to get together with their partners. And sometimes it was, they can choose their partners. And a lot of times it was us, giving partners so students can know every student in the class. Sometimes we gave prompts for the questions and conversations that they can have. And sometimes they just were able to talk themselves. And so they had about 10 or 15 minutes just to get to know each other, just to learn something about each and every student in their classroom, knowing something unique.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in on the odd days that we didn't. Yeah. I remember coming in and they would say, well, where's our conversations? Yeah. So it had become such a part of our routine, and coming in or hearing them say, well, no, I've already met with that person, so it's now my turn. So they knew and anticipated they were going to get a chance to communicate with these other kids. And it was a very safe, sort of deliberate way for them to do that. We assume kids just can conversate, and we talk about the digital age. It's another whole world for them. So this was really, really important, and they really liked it.
They needed to be explicitly taught how to have a conversation.
Yes. And I think at the end of it, we did this activity where we had students write to each other what was the most important thing that they learned about them. and they had learned something about every kid. So everyone was valued in the classroom, and it was reflected in terms of how they treated each other. It just felt like we'd gone deeper. So that was kind of a breakthrough for us, I think.
And in addition to those daily conversations, one thing that I felt so meaningful, and I know the other girls did too, is that we had conversations with each of our students. So we had about a 15-minute conversation. We had time set out to have a 15-minute conversation with each student. We had a juice box and a cookie, and we just talked. And the things that we learned about our students, like, you know, where their parents are from, how they met, what their favorite sport is, just anything. And they were just free to talk. And one student, I remember at the end, just said, "Oh, thank you, Miss Gibson. That was the best thing that I've ever done." And I just like, it was so amazing just to get to know our students that way. So that was pretty awesome. Kel's going to share about another project that we did with the kids.
So at the beginning of the school year, we were talking about how everybody has wisdom. Everybody comes into our classroom with wisdom. And sometimes kids are like, "What? I have a wisdom." Yes, you are wise. And so it's getting them to reflect on their personal wisdom. What did they bring in that's vital? What do they live by every single day? And so kids wrote them down, and we posted them. You can see them at the bottom of our screen. We posted them in our classroom. And as kids looked at other kids' wisdoms, they started connecting and saying, "Oh, that's kind of how I feel too." And it was also too, when a student had a bad day, they could go back and they could look at their wisdoms. Yeah, I am valuable. Yes, I do bring something to this classroom. Yes, I am important. And I think we just tried to reiterate that as a classroom all the way through. So that was one of the big things that we did, and we still continue to do. It's valuable.
And I think you can see some of the other, we talked about the graffiti wall. That was another place where kids could share their voice. And again, I feel like these are things we've done in our rooms somewhat, but because it was so deliberate and we had time carved out to meet, we had time to meet with each kid. I feel like they felt safer and that they were more vulnerable. And it was shocking, some of the things that we heard from the very quiet kids that wouldn't share. But now it was a safe place to put up their stickies. Or when we talk about belonging, we would design what that looks like, feels like, sounds like in our room, in our hall, in our wing, in our community. So the idea being we're trying to build and help these young citizens think a little bigger and hopefully take it when they leave our halls. So we throughout the year would put up and talk about belonging, and they were the ones coming up with, "You know what it does feel like now? It feels like this, or it doesn't feel like this, but it should sound like this." So it was giving them the voice. We were trying to sort of step back and be the catalyst instead of, traditionally saying, "Well, this is what we're going to do and why." They were designing it, and we revisit it all the time. And I thought that was really important.
I think that we got some really excellent advice too from some of our secondary colleagues that had done some of this student voice work. We started off thinking that we should be getting student writing prompts. So we should be asking them in writing. We should ask them to share their thoughts out loud. And some of the advice we got back from our colleagues were just like, that's not how you're going to get the voice of your introverts. That's not how you're going to get the voice of students who might feel culturally different from other people. And so we use technology where students could feel just a little bit more anonymity to be vulnerable, or even just things like a sticky note. It's funny how when you put something on a sticky note, it doesn't seem permanent as you're handing in a journal or something like that. So I just thought that was good advice that we received along the way. And just a few other images that you see here, but just doing different things, community things, having sales, going to different events as a class. I mean, just really purposeful on how we're doing together activities. Building that team.
Yeah, and it was team focused. And there were many things that we did as a group that if we didn't all participate and all work together, it would have flopped. And kids soon recognized that that's what was happening. So then they were binding together more and helping one another more. So it was all about creating this community. And again, it was deliberate. We were deliberately finding things that we could do that everyone would have to participate, that you couldn't sit on the sideline. You had to be in, and safely in.
I think also if we think back to what we need to do as a team, let's throw in a pandemic. So when we had all these great things planned, and then all of a sudden we were cohorting really hard and kids were now pulled back. That was difficult for us because we are very group, kind of big group, and we've done all these team things. Our barn doors were closed.
And put on a mask and take
And-
away everyone's nonverbal
Yes.
communication skills and their body language.
So that part, I feel like that flexibility piece, I think I can speak for all of us. We learned a lot in how we needed to shift, but it was interesting how the kids guided us. I always say the kids are the ones, they just kind of soldier through and let it. So that was something, the flexibility piece, I feel like we did okay with that part of it.
We feel like we could talk at length of all the different discursive strategies we tried, what worked and what didn't. We do have a list of our strategies that we did use that can be available for the McDowell Foundation for teachers to look at later. We always tease each other that we bring something different to the table. So I know I always laugh that I feel like every time these three speak, they're speaking of the heart of the work. And then because I moved to a different school, I kind of took on the role of, more of the researcher or the person who planned the methodology. So it's and now we should end with the way that we actually concluded our analysis and our methodology.
That's why you're part of the team.
So when we looked back and reflected on our work in a way that we could share it in a meaningful way with our colleagues across the province, we did a little bit of an analysis and we found that there were 4 emerging themes that came out of our work together. One of those themes was building in regular classroom routines for belonging. So we started to call this our heart work. This is the day-to-day routines that were built into the grade 7 learning community. So that's where you see things like our daily walks, the daily conversations, the language that began to become commonplace in the classroom and the routines that was kind of the underpinning of this work. We did make a list of 10 discursive strategies that we did connect to curriculum that we felt worked really, really well. There were ones that we didn't feel worked super well. We had some ones that we tried and we failed, but we thought we'd put together 10 descriptions that could help other teachers do that in their own classrooms if they wanted to. We felt it was really important that there was opportunities for students to lead and find agency in their classrooms. So those team building activities, building in ways for students to feel valued, that it wasn't the teachers leading the work, but teachers more facilitating, students being able to come forward with how they were actually feeling and the solutions that they felt could improve their classroom learning community. And also just the purposeful inclusion of team and community building activities. So the more time you spend together as a group doing fun things together, purposeful team building activities, the more you're going to get to know each other and not feel like it's just the same 3 friends you have to hang out with over and over again. Yeah, becomes more comfortable as a wider community. And then it was interesting because the last year of this work, I wasn't actually a part of the same school as my 3 colleagues. So I actually got to look back and take a look at some of their work and some of their journal reflections. And I was meeting with them regularly. And I think there was even some things that they couldn't recognize in their own teaching that they were so close to the work. So things like how purposefully these 3 women built relationships with their students. I think you can do all the discursive strategies in the world, but if you don't care about actually building relationships in the classroom, those strategies are going to fall flat. And then the disposition of the classroom teachers who lead in the community really matters. So same thing, if you don't believe that belonging work is important, if you don't believe students should have a voice, if you're teaching at the front of your classroom from a position of power, and you're not willing to share some of that voice and power with your students, again, those discursive strategies, you can use them all you want. We don't feel like they're actually going to change the practice or the learning community. So we've kind of rambled on a little bit. We showed some images, but we would love to just hear your feedback or any questions you would have for us. That's kind of the last little bit of our formal spiel there.
Unmute. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your work. I mean, I have had the privilege of journeying alongside you a little bit as you've done your work, and you have shared with me, for which I've been grateful, but it's great to see. I do want to, before we go any further, say that these 4 amazing women have also created a book, and it's a book that reflects the thoughts and feelings and ideas of students, but also some of what they've talked about. And I didn't bring my copy home. I'm doing this from home today. They graciously gifted the McDowell Foundation a couple of copies. One of those copies will be available at the Emma Stewart Resource Center starting next week, though. So if you'd like to see some of the work that you've seen on the screen tonight, plus a whole bunch more, I will be sending out that link and having it available, because I have to say it's beautiful, and congratulations. It is an absolutely stunning piece of work. So if you want a little taste of a little more, even after tonight, the Emma Stewart Resource Center, which is of course the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation Library, will have a copy of this that will be available to teachers and others across the province. So, all right. I feel like you've kind of addressed some of this a little bit, but just to kind of start off the slightly less formal part of the conversation, I have to say I'm so impressed that this was focused on middle years. I feel like middle years is kind of that in-between point between child and not quite child, which both makes this so important, but I also wonder if makes it a little more challenging. So just as we start to progress in, and Fatima, I would invite you to also dive into this at any point that you'd like to as well, but what are some of those kind of challenges to be doing this belonging work at middle years? But also, what are some of the possibilities? I will say I have a 13-year-old daughter who's just starting to move through that phase. And it's that fascinating mixture of child and not child, child and the adult they're going to become. So I wonder if you could reflect just a little bit on why this is so important at that age, but also what are some of the kind of possibilities and challenges that age might bring? And I'll say I'm not a teacher, so I always identify, I'm not a teacher, I'm a sociologist. So for me, I don't have that same kind of connection. So I wonder if you could just share some of that with us.
Well, I think that we could say that we chose to be in middle years for many of those reasons. We talk about how they are a different breed. And they are magnificent. You know, they are in between, just as you said, you know, being a little kid and then being those teens. And I think that's part of why this work works so well, is because we're at a point where we're starting to say to them, what do you think? Why do you think that? Start to challenge the world a bit, respectfully, those kinds of things. And also, because they're at that age, they're so cognizant of their peers, and do they fit? Do they not fit? Different than a 7-year-old who is fine just to go play with anyone. These creatures are very delicate, and working with them, we recognize that we want to get them to connect, but we have to do it in a way that's going to make sure they're safe and kind of being a bit vulnerable. So I think like any classroom, we talk about they need to trust us, but at this age, once they do trust you, you have their heart. And I think that's why this work, they sort of ate it up. You know, I don't know if you guys would agree, but it's not like they fought it. It wasn't something they you know, maybe put up a front at the beginning with these conversations with someone they didn't know, but then because they're so peer oriented, they saw it working.
And they're at an age too where they're just starting to come into their own independence.
Yes,
as
developing
well.
who they
so
are.
like in grade 1 and grade 2, you know, school tends to be a little bit more about what the classroom teacher is asking you to do. And in the middle years, there's an opportunity to use that, you know, how is your personality developing? How do you want to see yourself in the world? How do you want to interact with other people in the world? And they're experimenting with their own independence in many different ways. So,
and I think it's an opportunity too. A lot of kids at this age feel powerless, but it's important for them to understand that they do have power and they can use their voice for good. We've seen examples all around the world of young people changing the world. And especially during the times that we're living in, they need to know that they have the power to make a difference. And we are lucky in that we get to share that with them, and we can say, okay, what can we do? This is a problem in our world. How can we solve it together? And what are some of your ideas? And I think that's where voice comes in, right? It's so important that they understand that they have a voice and they can use it.
when just seeing that when they're coming back to school after we've had like a discussion about, you know, a difficult topic or something like that, and going home and talking to their families about it, like they're teaching some of their families. And that's pretty cool to see at that age. Again, them using their voice and going home and talking about it at home, and sometimes educating for the first time, or maybe having a courageous conversation at home with their families. And so it's pretty cool for them to come back and share some of that with us a little bit as well.
I think I'm going to just chime in here. First of all, I want to say thank you all for the invitation. I feel truly honored to be here and joining you all this evening, and listening to the incredible work that you all have been doing. Just like warms my heart totally. So that is point one. The second thing I wanted to say to all the teachers and educators on the call today, as a parent, I just want to thank you all for coming out every day during these really, really difficult last 18 months and being there for our kids and modeling for them what it means to be courageous and resilient, and to be a force with whatever challenge they face. So thank you all to all the educators on behalf of myself. I think, Krista, you said at the very beginning that you were able to do this work because you found your people. And I actually wrote it down because I think that underpinned not only what you were able to achieve, but just we all need to find our people to belong. And when we do that, you know, this is what we can achieve together. So that is just so very important. And in the middle years, so I'm a mom to 2 older boys now, still both teens, but not quite, and an almost 13-year-old daughter. And so the middle years, you know, I've experienced it and I'm going through it again. It's a time of change, for sure. It's a time where they're looking to develop their identities, you know, who they are. They don't even often know who they are at that point. So you've given them the tools really to introspect and to dig deep, you know, within themselves, to find their value, to find their worth, and not only to find it, but you validated that for them. So it's so incredibly important to have that validation, because only when you do you give them almost permission to live in that skin and show their, you know, their true worth and let them shine. So that was really something that I think you managed to encapsulate within the relationship that you built with your students. So just purposefully and intentionally giving them that toolbox that they can draw on as they develop their own identity, and then use the very best of themselves to build relationships with each other is just a gift that is just priceless. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I thank you so much, Fatima. I do have a curiosity. Do you know you all were teaching them how to build community? That's absolutely amazing to me that you spent an entire, I would think, year teaching individuals who were just coming into their own voices and their own identities. And let me tell you, my own understanding is middle years can go off the rails pretty fast. And yet you seem to have found a way to build community. And as I was sitting here listening to you talk and then listening to Fatima talk, I thought, you know, in a time where community seems to be unraveling a little bit around us, certainly south of the border, but up here too, I wonder, you know, thinking about sense of belonging and all of this stuff that we're talking about, how do you see this in connection to building a community that maybe, you know, I know your focus was on the classroom and it's incredibly important it was on the classroom, but thinking about the classroom and beyond into our communities, how can some of these lessons support maybe building a community that we all want to be in and where everyone's welcome. Because sometimes I will admit I'm fearful that maybe we're moving different ways in communities. So I know that's kind of a big thing, and I'm not sure it's fully a question, but I wonder if I could invite you to reflect on it. I also would remind those that are in attendance, if you do have questions or comments you would like to make to the panelists or to anyone here, do please feel free to put them in the chat, Q&A, or raise your hand.
I don't know. I just, in responding to that, I think about our infusion of consensus, and we're a consensus school. So we work based on citizenship principles. So when we think about engaging into our community, what does that look like? When we think about treating people just with, I just go back to our 5 E's.
Empathetically and ethically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we go through those 5 E's with kids, and then they can start hearing and seeing different perspectives. And we talk about, okay, so you have a disagreement or you see something differently than someone else. What do you owe them? Well, I need to owe them respect. I need to listen to what they're saying. Yes. So we did debating in our classroom where you had to sit and listen to one another. You were on different sides of it, but you had to listen to each other's arguments and then respond in a calm way where you listen and take note of what they were saying. I think that's very important in a middle years classroom and beyond.
We also talked a little bit as we were preparing for this presentation about how students don't just learn within the 4 walls of a classroom. Students are learning constantly. They're learning in their community. They're learning at the dinner table with their families. They're learning on the soccer field. And students are bringing their experiences from the community into our classroom learning communities. And they're also bringing the learning experiences from the classroom back into their home lives and onto the soccer field and into the other areas of their life too. So these our students don't exist in a vacuum. They don't come and engage in belonging and citizenship work from the hours of 9 to 3:30 and then go home and they're somebody different. So I think when you're part of a team that's raising kids alongside parents, you see that those experiences come and go from different areas.
Yeah, we are a microcosm
And I
of
think
society.
sorry, I was gonna say, I think that made me think about how I think one of the things we say constantly is, it takes a village and we are a village, we're working together. And I think about some of the language we use, and it was wonderful then to hear the parents say, yeah, kids are saying this, or they're doing this, or they're, what they're taking from us. And I think also what we're talking is sort of how we're trying to lead by example, that the kids would see us in the hallways talking about having respectful disagreements. So we like to say, good or bad, they're always watching, they're always learning and thinking. So we're hoping they will take this then into high school, right? And then bigger. And again, the citizenship work is just part and parcel of it. It's hand in hand with what we do.
Absolutely. I think the citizenship work, where it becomes really important that it is very purposeful and intentional is because children are constantly learning everywhere. What this does is give them the tools to critically analyze things and to unpack those concepts that need to be unpacked. And if we don't give them the tools in the middle years to do so, they are not going to, as adults, be able to process those. And so even more so, this type of curriculum needs to be, intentional and purposeful, so that we actually do create those competent citizens, those responsible and respectful adults that we want to, be our future leaders.
Yeah, and that's one thing I was just going to say, Fatima, like the critical thinking piece, right? Like having our students be critical thinkers and giving them the space to be able to do that within the classroom and to hear different, viewpoints and be able to really think about that and think about it in a couple different ways, right?
Yeah, because different viewpoints is something that's healthy.
Yes.
But you need to have that safe space where you can, enter in respectful dialogue. okay, and meaningful discussion. And you don't always have to agree with the other person, but you have to learn how to disagree.
Yeah.
And that piece is often missing in society today. It's evident all around us. And so by you creating that safe space within the classroom and allowing for differing opinions, you know, has given them those critical tools that they're going to need to navigate those challenges ahead of them.
Definitely. Well, and showing that we're learners too, right? We're still learning as well, right? There's lots of things that
absolutely
different things that are happening in our world and that we are still learning as well. And I think that's important that the kids see that as well. And as an adult, you can still learn and grow and develop and learn and think critically. And I think that's really important as well.
Well, I know whenever I engage with any students in this field or just in conversations with them, I end up always learning something. No matter which classroom I walk into and however old the children are, they always teach me something. And I think it's going into anything with that open mind, that it's a journey of empowerment. And, you know, you've opened young hearts and shaped young minds, and I'm just super excited about this. So, thank you.
Could I ask a quick question of our teachers there, Ellen? Could I ask a quick question? So, you guys have found your people. You're teaching at a consent to school, or you have taught at a consent to school. I'm assuming, as a perpetual middle years child myself, I have to say, what concerns me now is that I know for a fact that every classroom in Saskatchewan needs what you're doing. Okay, I don't think anybody in this call would disagree. So I have a question of implementation and spreading this other virus. You know, like we haven't. Please don't talk about that virus. Let's talk about that virus. But I'm actually really interested in how you think we spread this virus and how we implement it. If government was to say, this needs to be in every classroom in Saskatchewan, if not in every Western democracy, which would be my opinion, what would you do to make that happen?
Well,
like, what is your advice to, like, you know, Fatima is working for an organization that's trying to do that. I think I work for an organization that's trying to do the same thing. And I think we've done it in Saskatoon. And I'm going to say, way to go, right? But I think every classroom in Canada needs it. What's your advice to people like Fatima and I?
I can just speak from an administrative perspective, and I think that you probably want to hear from a teacher's perspective, but creating space for teachers to meet and collaborate is going to breathe life into this work. So if the culture of your building is teachers work in a vacuum and they don't have time to collaborate, and staff meeting time and PD time is eaten up by managerial items, this work will never have life breathed into it. But if you create your prep schedules with collaboration as a value, and you give people common collaboration time, if you allow staff meeting time for staff to have conversations with each other, they're going to naturally want to work together. Teachers are natural collaborators, and all you need to do is create space and time for that to happen, and it will. But if you don't create time and space for that, teachers will shut their doors and work alone.
I think teachers always feel so overloaded, right? There's always another new program to learn or something. And so when they hear, oh, we're going to pilot this and not have any background on it, people feel like they're done. So like Chantel was saying, if you work, like the great thing about the McDowell Foundation in this grant was we had time. We had time because the money allowed us to have time. We had time to collaborate and work together and build something because we were given time, and it was built into our schedule. That was the important part of this. So again, if it doesn't come across as another thing that we have to do, and if teachers understand how important it is, like how critical it is to our entire world, our community, then maybe there'll be some more buy-in.
And the idea that this isn't actually more work, it's less work, really, right? You know, once you have those relationships built, things just happen more naturally and more
Organically,
readily.
yeah.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that the P3 schools that we built in big chunks there not that long ago would all fit into your category, and if you don't define a culture of a school when you open it, it's really hard to change it. I've taught in schools in which the culture is super negative, right? And because people left it to chance to create the culture, right? And I'm worried coming out of this pandemic that we might do the same around socialization and citizenship and responsibility to each other. Those sorts of things, how do we inculcate that in every classroom? And how do we build, I guess the question I specifically I think we need people like you to one-on-one, teacher to teacher across the province spread this virus. It's not people like me or Fatima, sorry, Fatima, I'm not gonna talk to you. But you get my drift? That's actually how it impacts, how you impacted each other needs to be exponentially spread through, do what you did. And I
we
think
have to package you in a bottle and send you all over.
I'll send the
Send us
bottle.
all together. Can we all go together?
Teleport us.
I think there's a saying somewhere that says sit with the winners. And it's you're always going to find schools where, you might sit next to somebody who's feeling really burnt out, and they might be really burnt out for really valid reasons.
Yeah.
Or you might have the choice to sit next to somebody that's in a really negative space someday. But if you choose to do your work alongside, sit next to the winners, sit next to the people that you feel are going to breathe life into your work.
You stole that from Jody Carrington. I know you did.
Must be those PD dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah, working for us.
Ask the question too, please. We spoke about how it changed the culture in the classroom. So it had to have had some impact on learning and how motivated your students might have been or might not have been to learn more. How would you compare the learning and the uptake of information that you were giving to your students during these years as opposed to years previously taught? And that's coming back to creating that culture, because if I was a teacher and this was a really magic formula to get engagement from my students, then it doesn't take as much buy-in to latch onto a curriculum that would teach students to be better citizens. So did you find any change or any difference in actual learning or teaching?
I think part of it was that intentional of really trying to hear all the voices. So really thinking about some of those students that maybe they're not the ones that with their hand up ready to answer or ready. I think there was more thought for all the students versus okay, this is how it's going to be. A little bit more intention, I would say.
And I feel like we have taught for a lot of years that I think now when we're connecting with kids, which I think we've always done, and it's as simple as finding out how was your weekend and hearing that there's someone who plays hockey and taking the 2 minutes to say, hey, how did you do? Those are things I think we've always done. But now if we're trying to engage kids a little bit bigger, and I feel like now with lots of years of teaching, it's even more important now because there's so many other things happening with these kids. As Kel said, we're doing it intentionally. And I don't know, I feel like, are we engaging them more? Yes. And I think that's probably, again, because we're trying really hard to do it with purpose. But I feel like I just want to give kind of teachers a pat on the back. I think lots of us are doing this kind of stuff. I'd like to say this is all us and we invented it. We didn't. I think of teachers I had that took the time as a grade 7 Krissa to say, hey, what's going on? Or, hey, nice basketball game, or how's your, what's your dog's name? And we've kind of carried that on. So these are things teachers do, but having time. And again, I'm kind of repeating what was said, but all these new extra things that we have to do, I think we recognize we're sticking to what's important and we are doing what we need to do, but this is the basis of getting kids to learn anything. And then this is the stuff when we hear kids that come back at grade 12, or there was a boy came yesterday who's in grade 11 and walked in and he said, oh, I forgot to tell you this, it was, I won't say his name, anyway, he said, the 5 wisdoms, I remember doing that. And I thought, here we go, right? This is a kid who, you know, I didn't think we were connecting with him very much at all, and recognizing that. So I think we're doing things the same, but it's tweaked and it's intentional. That's part of it for me.
And talking about the learning too, I think sometimes when we're looking back on a project, we forget how actually hard going it was in the beginning. And do you remember,
Yes,
you were
yes.
mentioning, like, I remember our first couple of Zoom calls being like, it's like pulling teeth, like we're trying to get these kids to share their voice and they're giving us 1-word answers, or like we put together this, like, we found this belonging survey that was supposed to elicit all of the student voice responses and it didn't. And we were just like, well, like, we just made some assumptions in the beginning that students would know how to share their voice and that they would want to share it with us readily if we just ask them specific questions. And we realized, like, we needed to explicitly teach students how to be critical thinkers. We had to prompt them. So if they're giving us 1, 2, 3-word answers, you had to prompt, you had to ask more. And I think that waterfall activity was kind of a breakthrough. For that.
It was. So initially we did have them do this survey, and then we showed them their responses, like anonymously, of course. And the kids were like, oh, and we thought, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to have them sit around at tables and discussing.
Analyze the data.
Yeah, let's analyze this and let's get them to dig deeper. We got the worst, most shallow answers.
Terrible.
It was like, how are we going to prove? We're going to be nicer to one another.
What does that mean? What
yeah.
does that look like? How do you do that?
So we needed more than that. So then we started looking at different types of activities that we could hear deeper answers from, but we needed to organize them differently. And so anyway, when we did that, we did an activity that was a waterfall activity where we put a question out digitally, and then kids, we said, okay, think about your answers to this and respond. And they hit enter at the same time, and you could see all their answers trickle down. And then they could comment on each other's answers. So we were like sitting watching them in a chat room. And there were kids that would never put up their hand or never say anything, that were completely all in this chat room. And we could see what their thoughts were. And we could start to say, okay, what changes do we want to make based on this? It was fantastic and so fascinating.
Yeah, go figure. Students want to tell their thoughts on social media.
Now, just to jump in here, I think this actually ties in with a question we have in the chat. Kirsten has asked that some of the discursive strategies worked really well, and I think maybe that's what you were alluding to. She kind of wants to hear a little more about what resonated with these students at this age and why. And I'm not shocked social media might be one of them, but maybe you can share some of those kind of specific things. And I know you have the list of 10, and we will make it available through the foundation then, of course. But could you share just a little bit about what are some of those things that really worked in this age group and why you think those were the ones that the students really stepped forward with?
We had one called 4 Corners, and we used this in debate. It was excellent. So we post a question, and the question would be, what would be?
Do you think cell phones should be banned in schools?
Yes, and then they had to choose a corner. So agree, somewhat disagree, or disagree. So kids had to physically get up and move to the corners, and then they had to discuss in their corners why they believed what they did. And it was fantastic. And then at one point in time, we said, okay, now the somewhat disagree and the somewhat agree, now you have to move to one side and stay there. And so we gave an opportunity once they moved for everybody to basically speak from their corner and say, this is what I thought, and this is why. And then gave kids another opportunity to move again. And some did, some didn't, but some did. And again, it was just a great opportunity for everybody to have to make a decision. Everybody had to leave their seat. Everyone had to choose a corner, and kids were there. I guess there was one voice for 2 voices from every corner that spoke, but it was really good in terms of class participation.
Well, and they were using their voice regardless if they did speak or not, right? They're using their voice and their choice by going to one of those corners, and that was impactful.
Yep.
Looking inside out was another one, or looking out, looking in was another one that we did, that students quite liked. They were able to focus in, right? That was the focused in. You kind of zoom in on an image and you kind of just talk, you know, have some thoughts on it. And then you kind of just gradually zoom out, zoom out, zoom out, and then look at a bigger picture. But that was one of the ones that the students enjoyed. I think like the imagers or the actually moving around, like I think those types of things, those types of strategies are ones that the students really connected with.
When the spotlight isn't on like, okay, now we're going to ask you a question and everybody shifts and looks at you and that one person is talking in front of the classroom, or you have to share like one piece of writing. When it's like, when the focus is on the movement or when the focus is on the image, it kind of takes them out of self and it kind of allows them to be less self-conscious in the moment, and they realize they're sharing their voice without even really knowing they are.
One last question, and I promise I'll shut up. I actually have a bunch of questions, but Judge, now Senator Arnott, is my personal hero, and I think none of this work, maybe not none of it, but yeah, like I think he's helped a lot, right? Personally, and he has the 3 R's: rights, respect, responsibility, and then governments like to react to the traditional 3 R's, right? And yeah, for good and bad, the fact is the government's like that, right? Do you believe, based on what you've learned, that the judge's 3 R's, rights, respect, and responsibility, improve outcomes in the traditional 3 R's?
100%, 100%. I think that's the piece that we were saying. If that is the basis for working with these young adults and our future citizens, they feel respected and understand responsibility and what it is to be human with people. And we were just talking today in our room about sometimes you're going to agree to disagree. And they were like, you know, it doesn't have to be this or that. Then they're going to engage in what we're doing within the math, the reading, the writing. And I think that's hard because sometimes we're being pushed, government division, that this is what we need to do. Those are important things. However, if we don't have them at the heart first, if we don't have them trusting us and believing in each other and being those future citizens and believing they can be, then that's going to be difficult to get them to work on the other things that we know are important also. That's my thought. I kind of jumped at that 100%.
Like student voice lends itself to that as well, because not only is it about your opinion being heard, but it's also about allowing yourself to be respectful of other voices to be heard, voices that might be different than yours, being a part of creating a community where we each have a different responsibility in that, and in making sure everybody feels that their voice is heard. I'm a person that can take up a lot of space and voice in a place, and so I think that's something that our kids are noticing too. Am I talking all the time? Am I giving somebody a voice? Like, so there's responsibility in that as well as sharing what you think.
I'm interested in the research that's going to follow in the next few years. So like we kept our schools open, so the original March to June, the whole world shut down, right? But from the September subsequent to now, in Saskatoon, we really haven't closed our doors. And I think that's going to have a massive impact on how our kids socialize and how our kids are citizens and how our kids read and write, specifically for those kids in that K1, 2, 3 that haven't had a normal year yet, right? What's your next grant proposal to the McDowell Foundation?
Well, Kelly's actually going to solve that. She's got a new job now, responding to post-pandemic, because apparently now we're in post-pandemic.
But I think we can lead the world on some stuff. I that's part of my job to say that out loud, but I actually believe it, right? Because we were open and because you guys were able to be with your people, this is huge, right? Like I have family in the UK where they're still not back at school in large circumstances with little children, right? And I think we're gonna have a lot to offer the world with stuff that we've been, I think that, Fatima and those folks at Consensus have been working really, really hard on for a long time. And maybe this is time to show our teeth, and go, we're the best in the world at this,
John, you say, our schools are open, and they are, but doing this work, as Chantal had said, not all kids are back in school. And so that's a big step. Yes, we are open and we are running as normal as we can, but not all kids are back.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say everybody. I'm just
No,
saying.
I
that
know, but you know,
yeah,
that's
our
that
doors
idea,
were
right?
open. Our doors were open. You know,
Sure.
Yeah, I actually, sorry to interrupt. I actually would like to follow up on that. And we do have another question in the chat, and I'll get there in a second. I'm going to be a little bit self-indulgent for a minute. I've heard a lot about the reading gap and the math gap and all the kind of, like I sit at a few different tables as part of McDowell and part of the STF. And I've heard about a few of those things, and I've seen some kind of plans as to what we might or might not do to address that. But what I've been hearing a lot about as well is the engagement gap and the relationship gap. And as I've sat here and listened to your presentation tonight and then the conversation that followed, and I know John said we weren't supposed to bring up the other virus, but I can't help but bring up the COVID virus, right? The fact that we have had, we've got kids in grade 2 that have never had a normal year. We've got kids, my kid in grade 9 who's had a year and a half of way too many screens and not enough out there. And I wonder how you can reflect on what you have done in thinking about building community and intentionally building relationships. You know, you're talking to some leaders across the province right now. You're also going to be talking and are talking and will be talking to teachers. What would you say to them based on this work around addressing that relationship gap, the fact that many kids have been online, the fact that some kids are not back in school, that those who are back in school have not had a normal year and a half, whatever normal looks like? Is there something you can offer to them? And I know that's a big question, but you know, John's inspiring me to go with big questions.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think this work has never been more important. And we all see, I think, in our schools, in our classrooms, not post-pandemic, in the pandemic, what's happening with kids. We see it on the front lines every day. So this connecting with kids is never been more important. And it's interesting because we started before the pandemic and it's continuing, but I feel like kids are really, really needing it. And I'm not sure if all educators or, you know, if we're recognizing that, but it's a hard place for kids right now for all of us. So,
and it's not just the students, it's the community too. Like, you
it's
know,
the
it's the
bigger-
families, it's people are hurting and people are not connecting. And so that's a big part of it too. It's that it's our students and our school community, but it's our community bigger than that also.
I think it's also going to take a response from government and education and communities as a whole. There's a lot of interest right now to bring the reading scores back up to where they were pre-pandemic, or to address some of those math gaps for students that have missed some school. There's a socialization gap. There's a connection gap as well. And I think the acknowledgement that mental well-being and that physical well-being and that spirit of who we are is also something that we sometimes need to teach kids explicitly about. We have gaps to fill in that area as well. And I know it's not as easy to measure with a standardized test or with a reading assessment as it is some of our academics. But we've got some area to make up there as well. And so I think that putting that work to the forefront, that well-being work, that mental wellness, is going to be as important or even more important than bringing up reading and math scores.
When you were
I think,
senior students. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think we spoke about, expanding that toolbox that you all gave to your students, intentionally through this work. And part of that is the ability to talk when they need to be validated and to be listened to. At the time, we know that when we're talking about mental health, anxiety, issues that have bogged us all down for so long. And if you don't have the tools to process and deal with that, you're not going to be able to even learn the reading or the math skills or anything else that you need. You're not in that headspace or the mind space, or you're not even feeling safe inside yourself to face anything outside of you. So in doing this and in teaching students to be able to talk and express themselves and listen to each other and listen from their friends and be that support person and be the empowered person around their peers, is all part of addressing this bigger pandemic within a pandemic, and so I think that needs to be recognized first, because that's the foundation that any learning happens on. And if we don't have that, we can put as many tests in front of them or as many measures that we want to measure, but we're going to be measuring nothing in the end. So it's something that really needs to be looked at, from the very top. And it's something that, we need to recognize the value, not just, on the surface, but how it transcends into everything, in education. So.
Thank you for that. I feel like I asked a big question and I got some really big answers, and that's amazing. I want to read a couple of things from the chat for you. Bobby Tyfair, who is our executive director of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, says it's very wise to mention the gaps in addition to reading and math. You're 100% correct. Thank you for being such caring professionals. And I think that's really key there, as we're looking forward and thinking about how are we going to come out of this? I mean, I know post-pandemic is being thrown around yet already. I'm not certain we're there, but we will be. So as we start thinking about what happens as we move through this, what happens as things do start to return to whatever the new normal is. Randy Emerson writes, thank you for an inspiring evening, experiencing your enthusiasm and joy. But based on your research, what might be an aspirational goal for education over the next decade? So we've got about 10 minutes left. So I thought I'd turn that over to you and to the research team, but also to Fatima. What, if you were making the next 10-year plan in education, what would be some aspirational goals or our aspirational goal that you would want to see being reached, being a priority?
I think right off the top of my mind, while I give the research team the time to come up with a more credible answer, I guess. I think COVID is something we've all looked at most of the time as a challenge, but I like to flip the script and look at it as an opportunity. Okay, we've had the opportunity now to reset, to learn that it's okay to just stop and pivot and try something new. And I think part of, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, but I remember when you just started at the new school, we had a conversation about what an opportunity that presents itself, because you are now able to, from the bottom up, create that community that you want to teach in, and you want your students to learn in, and you want your parents to be part of. And so that was an opportunity. So I think we need to start looking at this as an opportunity. It's taught us, many new ways of how to connecting from afar, like we are this evening, And when we're talking about taking your work and rolling it out across the province and nationally and internationally and as far as we can go with it, these are new opportunities that it's opened up, it's created. And, I think we should use that. Not all students connect best in person. So what does a hybrid education model look like? What can best be done in person, and what needs to be done, together? And what are the small things that can be done, on an online module that doesn't take up as much time that this probably does take up? But it's so meaningful that you want to actually focus on teaching kids to become responsible and respectful adults who are going to be able to contribute to society. So balancing and reassessing what's important, and what may take a back seat sometimes. It's just some of my thoughts.
When we were talking about this, we were talking about relationships and rigor, right? What's more important? And I think what I've learned through all of this is to take a step back, because rigor to me is super important. I'm very goal-driven in our classroom. I want to get through units at a certain period of time. I am pushing, right? And this has helped me to stop and slow down and realize, yes, rigor is important, but so are relationships. And can they work together? Yes, they can. And so in having the time to deliberately focus on the discursive strategy so that kids have voice within curriculum is vital. And sometimes I was doing one thing without the other, or this without this, but working with them in concert made the difference for me as a learning professional in my practice. And I'm not there yet. And I think you get your feet in and you learn a little bit, and the more you learn, the less you know. And so now I feel like, okay, we've just started, but there's so much more out there. And I don't know, again, it's the tip of the iceberg for that, for me.
Well, and even just, what we're talking about now, talking about COVID and this post-COVID world, like, I mean, these are things that existed previous to COVID. And I think we're just maybe paying attention to them more now because of COVID. And so that's really important to think about, like, this isn't new. The fact that people are struggling is not new. And so I think it's important that it's now maybe brought to the light a little bit more, or that, I don't know if it's brought to the light more, but maybe people are looking more.
It's even put a microscope on how different groups of people were always marginalized, but the pandemic just magnified that as well. So, we've always had students in our schools who felt like they had a voice versus felt like they didn't have a voice, or have felt like they mattered, or felt like they belonged, or felt like they were same or different from people. And I think that some of the systemic issues that our community and our students have always been dealing with have been magnified by COVID, and they're not going away. So hopefully this has presented an opportunity to bring some of those real world issues into the classroom, or kind of convince teachers that this is important to pay attention to as well, that we can't just keep trucking along in our classrooms without paying attention to some of these systemic barriers that some of our students or our families or our communities are experiencing in difference from each other.
I think it's also unearthed many of those issues for students, and they need a place where they can unpack that and discuss it, and ask those tough questions and have those courageous conversations that we may have typically shied away from pre-COVID. So to create those spaces is even more important today than it's ever been, I think.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I can't help but go back to your comment, and I'm glad the foundation was able to provide it for your team, but the teachers need the time. I mean, that's what I'm hearing over and over and over again, from our COVID directed call work to your research to a conversation I had with a teacher yesterday, is building in the time for the collaborative work, the deep thinking, that the time and the space to be able to build those connections is just so important, and something that we need to continue to advocate for, and we need to continue to think about. So, John, did you have any final words before I do a wrap up here, or did any of the panel have any final words they'd like to contribute? I know I want to be respectful of time, and I know we're just about at 20 after, so I'd invite any kind of closing thoughts, and then I'll provide a few comments from the foundation perspective to close.
The time thing is circled 16 times on my page here, and for the time that you spent individually with each kid, not just collaborating with teachers, because collaborating with teachers is something that we actually have built in. But with 30, I don't have to explain to you guys that. But like, I'm actually really physically worried about the time factor, because I can see link agreements in which I'm responsible for coming under some severe pressure, frankly, because there's nowhere else for the balloon to burst. And I guess, and that's negative. On the positive side, can Saskatchewan create a mechanism to measure what matters? Can we create a mechanism to measure these things? Yeah, we're teaching them intentionally, but decision makers aren't shifting policy or legislation without measuring what actually matters. Can we quantify these things? And I think that's a question that I believe we can. Because they look at graduation rates as an example. What do you want for your system? Well, we want higher graduation rates. Well, as a parent, I want my kid to graduate, but I want much more than that for my kid. And I think all of us do. Every single one of our kids want more than that for themselves. But how do we measure that? Those things we know that matter most. And I think we can create mechanisms where the OECD aren't just measuring reading rates and standardizing math scores. They're standardizing well-being scores and standardizing engagement scores and citizenship scores, and how that relates to economies and to culture. That interests me, and I think Saskatchewan can do that stuff. I really, really do. People like the four magicians on the screen here behind the masks. You can do that, right? I think that's a big question, but I think we can make progress. And if we don't, we're culpable.
I am going to jump back in, John. I appreciate that so much. And I'm going to echo something Bobby said. Saskatchewan teachers can do that because Saskatchewan teachers are professionals. Saskatchewan teachers know where their kids are at. Saskatchewan teachers know how important this is. And I would suggest, that standardizing it or not, we just need to listen to teachers, because that's what I do for a living. I listen to teachers. It's the best job ever. I don't know how I got this gig, but I get to listen to teachers. And I got to tell you, you guys get it and you know. And what we need to find a way to do is amplify that voice in a way that brings that makes it the standardized test of which things are measured. It's that professionalism of teachers. Now that's my soapbox, and I'll be on it all day. So thank you for that. And I apologize for interrupting you, John, but that's what I'd say. We have the ability in this province to bring that voice forward, and we will do it by listening to our teachers. Research team, and Fatima, I've jumped in a few times. Do you guys have some final words you'd like to share with us?
Just
Thanks for the opportunity and your money.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you to the McDowell Foundation, because we wouldn't have had the time, and really we wouldn't have been able to delve into this without it. And so thank you to the McDowell Foundation for providing us that opportunity.
And I just in closing too, I'd also mention, if there's anybody here that's joined our presentation for the purpose of they are wondering if they can ever do a McDowell grant, or if they're wondering if they could apply, we aren't special people. We are not researchers. We had a lot of support, and the McDowell Foundation really gave us that support. Ellen's been walking us through every step of the way when we've had questions about, what a report should look like, how much work we should be doing in certain areas. So just thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the support you've provided us to get our project up and running.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to all four of you for leading with your heart and teaching with your heart, and just showing so much of passion for everything that you do. It's just, it's palpable, even though we across the screen from each other. But I just hope that you've certainly inspired me, and I'm sure that you've inspired everyone on this call. So I know that, we're going to get that momentum and that snowball effect. I don't want to say the S word, but and we can really move this not only in Saskatchewan but throughout Canada. So thank you to you all, and thanks for having me, McDowell Foundation. It was a pleasure working with you this evening. So thank you.
You're most welcome. As John said, I hope it's the beginning of a great friendship, not a one-off. I've so enjoyed getting to know you a bit through this call. And of course, your work precedes you, so I knew it was going to be a great night, but thank you for this.
Thank you.
And you're most welcome to the research team. I don't kid when I say I have the best job ever, because I just get to pick up the phone and I get to talk to people like you. And the money doesn't come from me. The money comes from our donors, and it's wonderful that they're able to contribute. But was so pleased to be able to support you in your work. It was truly a joy. So
I'd love to explore any opportunities we could have to move consensus forward with McDowell Foundation. So
for sure, we'll chat afterwards. Thank you, Fatima. I'll be in touch, and we'll chat, and we'll see where we can go. So, John, do you want a last word before I wrap? I know that you have much to say.
I think Chris is just dying for a glass of wine. Is that correct? Fair to say that?
I feel like you know me well, my friend.
Yeah. No, it's a pure privilege, and this isn't this. I think the energy that's around this room here tonight, this Zoom room, I needed it. Thank you. I needed it. Thank you.
I just want to thank all of you for first of all, for taking the leap of faith to do a notice of intent and an application. I think it can be a bit intimidating. You're going to do teacher-led research, you're going to do action research, you're going to do all these things. And I often think I scare people a little when they first come forward, because I tell them it's going to be work. And the work that the four of you have put in is really quite amazing, and teachers across the province and beyond are going to benefit from that, and I so appreciate that. Thank you to John and to Fatima and to Jay, our amazing Jay, who makes everything happen seamlessly. My technology ability fits on the end of a pin, so I'm always so comforted to have Jay in the background making sure everything happens. I also really appreciate John stepping forward and co-hosting. We had this kind of crazy idea last year to start co-hosting these with local associations, because so often I'm removed from where the research takes place. Less so here because it's Saskatoon, but it's so important, I believe, for local associations and presidents like John, who I know are on the ground supporting teachers, to be part of this and to recognize the work that you put in. And John jumped at the chance. He was, what do you need? What do you need from me, Ellen? I'm right there. And I appreciate that whenever I approach John with something, he always says yes, and he always steps forward. So thank you for that. And John mentioned that every Saskatoon teacher supports the McDowell Foundation through the local association. And we appreciate that support as well. STA has been a longtime friend of the foundation, and we appreciate the contribution that you make. So thank you, John, and thank you to all of your teachers. Our foundation exists because we believe in the professionalism of teachers. We believe that good research needs to come from all of us. When the foundation was started 30 years ago, and it's actually the 30th anniversary of the foundation this year, but when the foundation was started 30 years ago, it was because a group of really wise people, all of whom were teachers, said, you know what, we can't be getting our research from New York or from Toronto or even from the University of Saskatchewan exclusively. Good research that supports the policy John was talking about earlier, that supports the students in the classroom, has to come from the professionalism of teachers. And those individuals worked hard to create a foundation that I think we can be proud of. And I want to take a moment to thank our many donors. I have thanked the STA tonight, but our many donors who understand that teacher voice and teacher experience really matters in the classroom, and that through the foundation, we are able to fund amazing teachers such as this, who are able to do the work, put the time, put the effort, put the heart in, and bring this kind of work forward for leaders to see, for teachers to see, for all of us to learn from. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank the donors. I want to thank the research team. I want to thank the panelists for coming together tonight to make these kinds of things possible. I mean, I like I said, best job ever, and I so appreciate doing it. Having said that, it's late. It is 8:29, and I promised I would respect your time. So I hope you all have a great night. The video will be available within the next week or so. And as always, feel free to reach out to the foundation. If you're thinking you're the next research team and on this call, or if the four amazing people looking back at me want to think about a second grant, do reach out. I would be more than happy to support that work. Otherwise, have a good night. Thank you so much. And we will be in touch soon.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night.